Your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. Your vision blurs at the edges. You are sitting in a parked car, or maybe on the edge of your bed at 3 a.m., and you are absolutely convinced that the world is ending. It's a panic attack. It is a total physiological mutiny. Now cut to a completely different scene. It's October 7th, 1571. The Gulf of Corinth. The smell of salt water is being overpowered by the stench of black powder and fear. You are standing on a wooden deck that is slippery with blood, watching a wall of 300 enemy ships bearing down on you. These two moments seem like they belong in different universes. One is a historical epic. The other is a modern psychological breakdown, but they share the exact same frequency. They are both moments of total, suffocating crisis. Strangely enough, the solution that turned the tide in both of these scenarios is a simple string of beads. We need to talk about the Rosary, not as a piece of jewelry, and not just as a repetitive ritual your grandmother did. We need to talk about it as a piece of spiritual technology, a mechanism designed specifically for catastrophe. Because whether you are looking at a 16th century naval map or the broken landscape of your own mental health, this prayer has a weird habit of showing up exactly when the lights go out. We are going to unpack how a string of knots and beads became the ultimate weapon for what we can call spiritual first responders. To understand the weight of this, you have to understand the sheer scale of the panic in 1571. This wasn't just a war, it was an existential nightmare for Europe. The Ottoman Empire wasn't just knocking on the door, they had kicked it in. They were a unified, highly disciplined military machine that had been undefeated at sea for a century. They had taken Constantinople. They had just taken Cyprus. And the stories coming out of Cyprus were horrifying. Commanders tortured. Populations enslaved. The psychological terror in Rome was palpable. The Pope at the time, Pius V, was looking at a map that was slowly turning inevitable. He knew that if the Ottoman fleet broke through the Mediterranean defenses, Rome was next. The St. Peter's Basilica you see today might have become a mosque. That was the reality. So Pius V does the impossible. He scrapes together a holy league. It sounds impressive, but it was a mess. It was a fragile coalition of Spain, Venice, and the Papal States. Nations that usually hated each other and were constantly bickering. They managed to assemble just over 200 ships. But the Ottomans? They had nearly 300. They had the numbers. They had the wind. They had the momentum of history on their side. On the morning of October 7th, at a place called Lepanto, the fleets locked eyes. And here is where the story shifts from military strategy to something else. Pius V didn't just order the ships to sail. He ordered Europe to its knees. He didn't just ask for prayers. He weaponized the Rosary. He ordered churches to stay open around the clock. He organized massive processions in the streets of Rome. And on those ships, facing a superior enemy, thousands of soldiers and sailors were handed rosaries. You have to picture this. Hardened mercenaries, men who lived by the sword, kneeling on the rough wood of a galley deck, gripping these beads, mumbling Hail Marys while watching the enemy fleet close the distance. The battle starts, and it is a disaster for the Christians. The wind is blowing hard from the east, driving the Ottoman sails, pushing them forward, and blowing smoke and ash right into the faces of the Holy League. They are fighting blind and fighting upstream. It is a grinder, wood shattering, iron tearing through flesh, or un sommet of stalemate. But then the impossible happens. And I don't use that word lightly. The wind shifts. It doesn't just die down, it reverses. 180 degrees. Suddenly the Ottoman sails go slack. The smoke that was blinding the Christians is blown back into the eyes of the enemy. The momentum physically turns. The Holy League surges forward. The Ottoman line breaks. It turns from a battle into a rout. By sunset, the invincible fleet is gone. Nearly all of their 300 ships are sunk or captured. Only about 30 escape. The waters were red. 30,000 Ottoman sailors perished. And in the hulls of those Turkish ships, something incredible was found. 12 to 15,000 Christian slaves, men who had been chained to oars for years, suddenly blinking in the sunlight, free. Back in Rome, weeks before the news could possibly arrive by horse or ship, Pope Pius V was in a meeting with his cardinals. Suddenly, he stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the sky, and turned back. He told them to stop their business. He said, "Our fleet has won." He knew. He attributed it 100% to the Rosary. This is why, even today, October 7th is the feast of Our Lady of the Rosary. It marks the day that beads beat bullets. But let's pivot. Let's bring this down from the high seas to the human heart, because you probably aren't commanding a galley ship today, but you might be fighting a war in your own head. How does a 16th century victory translate to modern anxiety? The mechanism is surprisingly similar. The Rosary acts as a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, and modern psychology is actually starting to catch up to what mystics have known for centuries. Think about what happens during a crisis. Your mind spins, it loops, you obsess over the what-ifs, you spiral. The Rosary intervenes in that spiral physically. It is tactile. It gives your restless hands something to do. It's haptic feedback. Moving a bead between your thumb and forefinger grounds you in the present moment. It is a physical anchor. Then there is the rhythm. The repetition of the Hail Mary isn't about mindless babbling, it's about regulation. It functions like a mantra. It slows your breathing. It regulates your heart rate. It forces your brain to switch tracks from panic mode to prayer mode. But it is deeper than just Christian mindfulness. If it were just breathing, you could use a stress ball. The Rosary works because it engages the intellect with a story. It forces you to look away from your own internal train wreck and look at the life of Jesus. When you pray the sorrowful mysteries, you aren't ignoring your pain. You are bringing your pain to the foot of the cross. You are saying, "I am suffering, and I am looking at a God who suffered." You are no longer alone in the dark. You are walking through the agony in the garden. You are walking to Calvary. It reframes your suffering from a meaningless tragedy into a shared burden. We see this in the stories of people right now, today. Take the case of severe anxiety. I'm talking about the high-functioning person who looks fine on Instagram, but feels like they are dying on the inside. They've tried the apps, the breathing techniques, the medication, and the dread is still there. Then they pick up the Rosary. At first, it feels mechanical, maybe even boring, but night after night, as they work the beads, the background noise of their anxiety starts to lower. The panic attacks that used to feel like tsunamis start to look more like manageable waves. They realize that when the terror rises, they have a weapon. They aren't helpless. They can grab the beads. It empowers them. Or look at the crushing weight of grief. Picture a woman who has just lost her husband of 40 years. The silence in her house isn't peaceful. It's aggressive. It screams at her. She can't sleep. She can't think. She finds his old rosary in a drawer. She starts to pray, not because she's pious, but because she is desperate. She is drowning. And as she whispers those prayers, crying through half of them, she realizes something profound during the crucifixion mystery. She realizes Mary watched her son die. She realizes that the woman she is praying to understands this exact, specific flavor of heartbreak. The rosary didn't bring her husband back. It didn't magically fix the grief, but it gave her a container for it. It gave her the strength to get out of bed. It turned her grief into a prayer instead of a prison. This is the secret. From the violent waters of Lepanto to the quiet desperation of a hospital waiting room, the rosary is the same tool. It is an anchor. When the world is spinning out of control, whether that's a geopolitical crisis or a personal tragedy, the rosary tethers you to something immovable. It connects your small, fragile life to the massive, eternal story of Jesus and Mary. So here is the reality. You don't have to be a saint to use this. You don't even have to be particularly religious to start. It is a lifeline, and lifelines are for anyone who is drowning. If you are facing an impossible battle right now, if you are staring down your own Ottoman fleet of debt, or depression, or fear, I want to challenge you. Don't just watch a video about it. Test it. Pick up a rosary. Commit to it for 1 week. See what happens to the noise in your head. See what happens to the peace in your heart. And I want to hear from you. Seriously. Go to the comments and tell me, have you used this prayer in a crisis? What happened? Your story might be the exact evidence someone else needs to see right now to believe that hope is possible. If this resonated with you, hit the like button so the algorithm pushes this hope to more people who need it. Thanks for watching.